We also have members of our Democratic Services team present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes, Helen Ainge and Sarah Evans. As there has been a recent announcement to follow new COVID guidance, you will see that we have limited capacity this evening. Therefore, once the application you are interested in has been concluded, could you please leave the meeting to allow other members of the public to enter the public gallery to listen to the application of interest to them? Thank you in advance for your cooperation in following this guidance. We now move to the main agenda. Can't you hear at the back of the hall?
Just close, not close.
Okay. On the agenda, we've got no apologies for absence. We are a full team this evening, I'm pleased to say. So the minutes of the last meeting, as everybody has read them, are there any issues with the minutes? No. Can I have a proposer for the minutes then? Councillor Illingworth has proposed, Councillor Steadman has seconded. We're now on to our first matter on, oh, sorry. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'll declare an interest in the last application of the evening due to a potential perceived bias if I took part in that debate due to my friendship with the previous landowner.
I'll be speaking as ward councillor on the Harby application and the Stouthern application.
I've got one point of interest for the last order, which is Councillor Joe Orson, who has said that he will not be speaking on the application or commenting on it, as is a personal and disclosable pecuniary interest in that matter. That's at Old Dalby, sorry. Right, over to the first application then. Millway Foods Limited, 190138 for Millway Foods Limited, Colston Lane.
Can we get the images up straight away and I'll just do a quick jaunt through them. But before I do, the briefest of updates, just to let you know, in fact, can I refer you to section 310 of the report? It's a bit easier that way. I'll make 2 points here. First is the update itself, which is that we received notification that the developers have now received agreement with Severn Trent about their discharge. And Severn Trent have a global agreement with the Canals and River Trust that they can discharge into canals with certain provisions, obviously, and therefore this developer is able to access that agreement now that he's satisfied Severn Trent. But a very important point is what it says at 3.10.2 in this report already, which is the drainage arrangements aren't a subject for this application tonight anyway, so it's a bit of a distraction because it's not a reserve matter. Doesn't mean they won't be dealt with. It's dealt with under a condition rather than as a reserve matter, which, as you know, are defined as design, layout, quantity, materials, landscape, as opposed to all the other matters we address by condition. So sorry if that's a red herring. So on the application itself, blimey, those of you that have been with us for a while will remember the twists and turns that this one's took. So this is the site just outside Harby that is always known as Millway Foods, I believe. It's had many outline applications, and what's important in here is sort of identifying the right one. So the one to which this application relates was actually refused by us, but granted on appeal, and it is the reserve matters associated with that one. That granted the specific number of 53 houses, and it also granted the access arrangements from the site and in the immediate road network around the site. So again, they're not covered tonight because they've already been dealt with, basically. If we can move on a slide, please. Who am I talking to? Sarah. So that's the layout. This application's been through a couple of amendments. There's been one of the community workshops that we hold on it that drove a few of the amendments. So the layout is fairly conventional, but it shows a rich mix of house types and sizes. I've got some examples of those to follow, which I'll not dwell on too much because I think they speak for themselves. It's got a rich choice of materials. Again, there's a little diagram showing that in a moment. The design is slightly different from what we usually say. And when you see those pictures, you'll see what I mean by that. It delivers affordable housing, not as per policy, but beyond our policy requirements, because the 106 on this was drawn up before we had the local plan. So it's actually trumping what we asked for now by a few percent, which translates into a couple of extra houses in reality. And if I can really home in on an issue here, which I know is close to all of our hearts, in the workshop I referred to, our old friend, the question of tandem parking was raised, because it always is. It wouldn't be a meeting without that being raised. And it's fair to say this scheme is almost ubiquitous. Tandem parking is almost ubiquitous through this scheme. There's no shortage of parking. Some of these plots have 4 spaces. A good number of them have 4 spaces, but they're pretty much all in that tandem arrangement that that falls foul of our judgment, and it's now in the design SPD and so on and so on. So if you go back to the root cause or the root concern of all of this stuff, the thing about tandem parking is that our concern is people won't use it, and therefore they park on the street and clutter the place up, and it can look appalling. And we know of examples of that. So the applicant's response in this case has been, and if you really scrutinize this plan, you'd see them, has been to provide 19 unallocated lay-by type parking spaces that people could take advantage instead of having to be scattered through the streets and half parked on the pavement and all that sort of thing that offends us. As I say, you really need to home in on the detail of this plan to see them, but they're along that north boundary, for example. There's some in the heart of the site, some on the left west of the site. So just to let you know, that's kind of that's been the fruition of that workshop, and I'm raising it because I know how important we regard it. The other thing I'd like to draw out is, if I could draw your attention to the top right hand corner, you can see there that there's a group of houses that share a small parking courtyard of, well, it's not that small actually, because it's 20 spaces. And because of the difference of house sizes in there, 4 of those spaces are all in front of that brown coloured house in the furthest top right corner. And it's been pointed out that that means like strangers will be parking outside someone's house habitually, because that's where their parking space is, as simple as that. So just invite you really to impose a condition or instruction to officers or whatever to ask for that little bit of the site to be tweaked, redesigned to overcome that issue, if of course you are mindful to approve tonight. If we can do a quick waltz through the other plans, please. So that's the materials plans. There's a choice of 3 materials that are blended through the site, and the colours here depict those choices. But the point I'm trying to make is there's quite a rich mix. It is not mundane in that sense. And 3 doesn't make it too disparate either, in my opinion. So we're quite pleased to see that. And the next one, please. So now here follows a whole load of different house types, which I think we can just scroll through, please, Sarah, because you'll see for yourself, A, that they're a little unusual in their fenestration. There's some brick details on there that, again, if you scrutinize closely, you can pick up, but also the variety of types and sizes. So very pleased to see a housing mix that actually accords with our policy, which is a treat, because they don't always, as we know. and the richness of the variety in itself, and as I mentioned earlier, including the affordables as well, beyond what we would normally ask.
Right, we've got one speaker and then the ward councillors. So Matthew Mortensen, please.
Many thanks, Chair. As has been set out in your officer's report, this Reserve Matters submission is made entirely in accordance with the outline planning application, which was granted in January 2017 on this brownfield site. Since submitting this application, there have been ongoing constructive discussions with your officers, as well as parish and ward councillors. As a result of these discussions, various amendments have been made to the proposals to reflect the feedback that has been received. As will be noted from the visualisations that have been submitted, the proposals seek to deliver a very high quality contemporary scheme which is respectful of the setting. Particular attention has been paid to the housing mix, with this being agreed with by officers. Despite little interest from registered providers in terms of the delivery of on-site affordable housing, our client has persevered over an 18-month period, approaching approximately 19 in total, eventually securing East Midlands Housing Group, who are to deliver all 19 affordable units. Legals were and have been formally instructed back in July 2021. Through a second workshop with the Parish Council in July 2021, the issue of tandem parking was raised, and as a result of this session, 19 new additional communal car parking spaces are provided within the development in the form of new parking laybys. This provides a significant amount, 36%, of additional parking within the development and reduces the likelihood of cars parking on the street. As a further measure and response to the Parish Council's concerns, the garages across the scheme were also increased in size to encourage homeowners to park within the garages themselves. This solution takes care not to impact on biodiversity and ecology, but rather promoting green space in keeping with the location. It has not been possible to avoid tandem parking arrangements in their entirety, as this would have created car parking forecourts in front of the properties, and on balance, this would have undermined the street scene and the character of the area. However, as a suitable compromise has been found, and it is pleasing to note that the Parish Council, who we have worked very closely with, have no objections to the proposals. All technical matters have been fully resolved with the support from your officers, and we are happy with the suggested conditions that are to be imposed. The recommendation in your officer's report is therefore fully supported, and as such, it is respectfully requested that members resolve to approve this Reserve Matters submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you just remain seated, please, in case anybody's got any questions? Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. Could I just ask one question, please? How much time or discussion did you have with officers in relation to our design SPD?
I know this this application has been in for quite some time. I think it was made in originally submitted in 2019, and I know almost throughout that entire time, ongoing discussions have been had with officers regarding the design of the scheme and addressing schemes matters such as car parking and tandem car parking, etc.
Just to clarify that. To be quite specific, so basically, while you were designing the layout of the scheme, etc., you were referring back to our SPD document. Yep.
It's something that has been taken into consideration in the design.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, this has been going on a long time. I rather think at one time there was going to be grass on the roofs of this development. So it was a long time. I wonder, we heard from our planning officer that Severn Trent are happy now with what is happening. Well, I'm never happy with Severn Trent. Have you had many discussions with them to make sure that the sewerage, etc., is going to be able to go in the sewers and not?
Councillor Holmes,
Yes.
if you can stop there, because this isn't really an issue. It has been sorted with
But-
Severn Trent.
I just wanted to ask the question because I'm very concerned for everybody.
Okay,
that's all.
fine.
Thank you.
I mean, all I can say at this stage is in terms of the discharge into canal, that is something that we will have more detailed discussions as a result of the discharge of conditions application that will come forward.
Any more questions? No, fine. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I'd now like to ask Councillor Steadman, who's the ward councillor, to take a seat. We're now on to our. Yeah. You're speaking, yeah.
Oh, glasses. Councillors, Chair, whilst the amendments on this site are most welcome, they do not go quite far enough. We have a specific parking policy in our neighbourhood plan, passed by an inspector because of congestion problems within our village. This is policy T4 and requires a minimum of 3 parking spaces for a 3-bedroomed house or more. Our design supplementary planning document states provide sufficient off-street parking without relying on tandem parking for day-to-day usage. To meet our policy T4 on this site, we have 23 triple tandem car parking spaces. How many sites have you seen with 3 cars parked nose to tail in a row? Although some pull-in places have been put in, they don't quite cover the problem areas. Plot 40 in particular, a 4-bedroom detached house, has 5 parking spaces side by side outside the front of the house. 2 of these spaces to meet our parking requirement will belong to a neighbour. Your neighbour's work van could be parked outside your lounge window. The applicant has worked hard to produce an environmentally visionary site, which even encompasses the affordable element. And I'm sure we can overcome these parking provisions with a bit more tweaking to the plans. I applaud the applicant on their house specifications and their desire to excel above the minimum standard. They have also worked particularly hard to involve the local community throughout their work, and their ambitions continue in this area. I hope we can rectify these problems fairly soon and bring this site to its conclusion. If you are minded to pass this application, I would ask that you attach 2 conditions delegated back to the Chair, Vice Chair and Mr. Worley. 1, that at least 5 more pull-in spaces are added to the site with landscaping, and that the parking outside plot 40 is rearranged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steadman. Any questions for Councillor Steadman? No? Oh, Councillor Brown, sorry.
So the 2 conditions you've asked for, Councillor Steadman, have you actually discussed those with the agent or the developer prior to tonight?
I did have a conversation with the agent last week saying that I wasn't really that happy with how far it had got thus far, and that more pull-in places would help alleviate on street parkers. And I'm sure you well know tandem parking just doesn't work.
Nobody else got a question? Right, over to debate then. Councillor Chandler.
Gosh, you're quick off the mark, quicker than me. I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, but I've got to bring up this discharging into the Grantham Canal. The Grantham Canal is in a terrible state on the Leicestershire section. Lincolnshire, you can boat down to Musson, but the Leicestershire section, it's virtually clogged up and you cannot do anything. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to...
This is a reserved matters application, Councillor Chandler.
I
and-
accept that, Madam Chairman, but this is a very serious matter, discharging into the
No,
canal.
nobody
and
disputes that.
and it floods into ditches, and in our case, it's flooding into Bottisford. And the Canal and Rivers Trust, who took over from British Waterways, have done no maintenance on the Leicestershire section since they took over 10 years ago, and it is a
With
serious
the greatest
matter.
respect, that
I-
isn't the problem of this
When's it going
applicant.
to be settled?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah. So I think it was Councillor Posnett said it's not a reserved matter for this application. And I said at the beginning, if I can recap, it's governed by a separate condition. So that's where it'll be settled. If it helps, the discharges of conditions are applications in their own right. And if you want to get close to that, or even if you want to bring it here, those mechanisms exist just as they do for all other types of application. So there's plenty, the normal opportunities to get involved apply to that one as well.
Well, may I ask then, Madam Chairman, that this condition is brought back to committee, because it is a very serious matter and it is of great concern to people on the whole of the stretch of the Leicestershire section.
Yeah, Councillor Chandler, I have no problem with that at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, yeah. Generally, so some good points about the application. Some concerns as well. Good to see the housing mix in it. Good to see the quality of the build, etc. I do take on board. The only thing is, I can see this just looking like Lake Terrace, and I drive past Lake Terrace every day, and it just looks like cars that have been just abandoned everywhere. And the design, I do really question, maybe Mr. Worley might be able to answer me, is that what real efforts did the officers, what detail did we go into with the developer to actually make sure that the developer understood the SPD and the tandem parking was as minimal as possible? Because I think that's the biggest sticking point here, is the design. And it's all right us approving something like this, but it's going to have to be lived with for generations to come. And if it's going to be something like Lake Terrace, God help anybody that has to live in a development like that, no matter how good it is, and especially our social housing tenants who will find it more difficult, probably with less space, etc.
I wasn't personally involved, so I can't sort of vouch from the heart about what went on, but it's evident from the workshop, I think in July, focused on the park arrangements, because it was from that meeting was born this idea of 19 extra spaces. So, and I don't know if it was couched in terms of the design SPD, which at the time was out for consultation or anything. But anyway, the topic was raised, and this was the result of it. I'm late to the party on this one, and only because of staff absence, to tell you the truth. My own input is the very first thing I did when I inherited the application to bring it forward was to phone the agent. It was a different representative of the company than Mr. Mortensen tonight, and said, I hope this is going to be a problem because it always is. So, and we had a conversation. I invited changes, but they asked us to proceed on the basis of the plans already with us.
Ask follow-up, another question, Jim. If, as Councillor Chandler just said, if we were minded to approve it tonight, you did mention around the other conditions. Would it be fair to say that you would advise us what those conditions are that could come back?
It's ever so straightforward, I think. Please don't take this as the exact words that we would write, but basically the first one would say, sort of notwithstanding the plans, a redesign around, I can't read the plot numbers, but that top right-hand corner is required to be agreed with us. And also notwithstanding the plans, a revision showing five additional spaces shall be submitted and approved. So we get to see where they sit. And they can just be bolted onto the end of what we've already recommended, if you're happy with them.
Okay, fine. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't know whether you're going to stop me saying anything here. Appendix B here. Canals and River Trust development proposed to discharge. What can you tell me? Can you repeat again, Mr. Worley? What you know, just to help me, please. Thank you for what.
But where it sits in the scheme of things. Yeah, okay. So it's about understanding what a reserve matter is, which is defined in law. And that's design, layout, appearance, landscaping, basically. So anything other than that isn't within the reserve matters application. But that doesn't mean it's lost because it's governed by its own conditions. And that's what I suggested to Councillor Chandler. You could get involved in as it follows its own separate course forward.
Did say, sorry, you did say something about Severn Trent at the beginning, didn't you?
The news I received yesterday is that the developers agreed, have made peace with Severn Trent on discharge rates or connection or something. And that in turn gives them access to Severn Trent's wide-ranging agreement with the Canals and River Trust. So it feels like a step forward, if not the final solution.
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry about this, but can we actually know what this is agreement? Because we are in a terrible state in this country where, and you must see it on the news all the time, that we are getting effluent going into the rivers and the streams. And I just feel that we ought to know what is happening. I am so concerned about it. I think you, as a medical person yourself, Madam Chairman, will know how dangerous it is. And I really, really would like to know, because I'm so concerned and worried about it. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what I know. First distinction to make is that we're not talking about the sewers here, we're talking about surface water. So it's not toilet water going in the canal. I understand, it's news to me, that Severn Trent have a very wide-ranging agreement with the Canals and River Trust, that whenever their connections are deemed satisfactory, they can then employ to discharge into whatever canal is the one nearby, wherever we might be happen to deal with. Not a free-for-all, it's not says, oh, chuck it in there. It's subject to all the usual provisions about flow and filtration and cleanliness and things like that. But by having made that agreement, they can then access that wider framework to make that the final destination for the surface water.
Yes, Councillor Holmes, I do agree with you that effluent going into rivers is a risk to health, and it's not nice and it shouldn't occur. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to have to start with these words, but enough is enough. That issue is not part of this application. End of story. There's a separate mechanism for dealing with it. We've had a proposal of or a request for some extra conditions. I'm happy to propose that we approve this subject to the extra conditions that the ward council asked for, and if necessary, any further reference to conditions about water. But I believe, we should stick to our agenda and our rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Well, it's been proposed, and you all know, and I need to, anybody's going to second it before we go into any debate. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, I'd like to second that because I think it's a really attractive development. I like the idea that there's a lot of parking, and if it can be arranged with the ward councillor for the extra 5 places and the probably the revision of the northeast corner, which seems a little odd to have a lot of parking outside houses in such an attractive overall picture there. So yeah, I can go with this. I think it's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Any more questions? Anybody? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I have to totally disagree on the design. If anybody who thinks that this design is good it's a different planet, really. So basically, I'm going to vote against this tonight, just based upon asking the developer to come back and give us a decent design that will be more adequate to the development. So I'd ask other members to do the same and follow me.
Right, you've heard what Councillor Brown said. Anybody else got anything to say? If there are no more questions, then we'll go to a vote. Anybody who votes in favour of this, can we please have a show of hands? That's 3. Against? Okay, then that means that the application has been refused. Or was it deferred? Just advise me that motion's not carried unless somebody, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'll come in with the motion. I'd like to refuse the policy on the application on policy D1 due to poor and inadequate design of this scheme. And I'd like somebody to second me on that, please.
Councillor Chandler seconded that. Thank you. Yes.
It would be helpful for me to draft the decision notice and, dare I say, any subsequent challenge to flesh the reason out with the specifics of the design that you're dissatisfied with. Please.
So local policy plan D1, poor design. The SBD states that everyday parking shouldn't be in tandem because the neighbourhood plan policy T4 requires a higher parking provision in the 3 villages as well. Okay, that's my. And the design and shape of the houses as well. The design and the constraint of the houses, the compact nature.
No, Madam Chairman, I think the houses have got to be village-like. These houses aren't. I mean, Councillor Holmes and I were out last week in Rushcliffe and Newark and Sherwood, and some of the housing going up in the villages, it's atrocious. It's not a bit sympathetic to a village life. And you've got a lot of, in Harbour, you've got a lot of Victorian and Edwardian houses. And this is going to just shout at it. It might be a mile or so away, but it's horrendous. We surely must build something in the villages that's sympathetic to the villages.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chandler. Anything else you want to add? Sorry. So, do we all vote? I need a vote now on the motion, please. So, all in favour of the motion? Yeah. Against? Any abstentions? Right, the motion's been carried. Application refused. We now move on to application 4.2, which is the hose garage of Harby Lane Hose. And it's Richard. And Richard Redford is there waiting to speak.
Many thanks, Chair. The application is as set out in the main agenda. As submitted, the application sought retrospective consent for the demolition of the garage and the erection of 3 dwellings. On that original consultation, we received a large number of objections from local residents and the parish, which are as detailed in the agenda. As a result of those objections and assessment against policy, amended plans were received, which reduced the number of dwellings on site from 3 to 2, whilst also providing additional information with regards to marketing and various other elements required by adopted policies in the local plan. So the scheme we have for consideration and determination tonight is as per the site visit plans. And if we can just jump to the PowerPoint presentation, please. The first drawing on it, yep, that shows the site location. The first drawing of those drawings shows the site location plan. With the second one, that one there showing the 2 parking spaces to the front of each dwelling. Now that is in addition to the integral garage, which does meet the relevant dimensional criteria for use by a car. So you can actually get a car into the garage without knocking a wing mirror off. Now, in terms of the floor plans, we can see on the next slide that each property will have 3 bedrooms, all served by en suites. There'll be an integral garage and a study at ground floor level alongside the kitchen, dining room and living room areas. Elevationally, the next drawing shows the elevations. Now, they are what we call handed. So the neighbouring property is a mirror image of what you will see there. And moving on to the next and final slide, this shows both of the proposed dwellings in the context of both existing neighbours. So we can see there that the neighbour to the left, as you look, is single story with a very high pitched roof, and there are all rooms in that roof space. Whilst to the right, you have another property that is 2 stories in height with pitched roof. So we can see that the 2 dwellings proposed have got an eaves level the same as the neighbouring 2-story dwelling, whilst having a pitched roof marginally higher than both of the neighbours. As set out in the agenda, officers are satisfied as a result of the amended plans provided and additional information that the relevant policy criteria have been complied with. I also draw your attention to the comments from the Parish Council on the amended plans. They are now satisfied that their numerous objections that were highlighted in their initial consultation response have been addressed, and they are now also satisfied that the development complies with their neighbourhood plan requirements. As such, the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the main agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for Richard? Councillor Chandler.
I think the report's very vague about contamination. I can remember that garage since the war, and they had petrol pumps at one time, and we all know in farmyards, garages and everywhere, surplus oil was always just ditched onto the ground. And I would like to be, I think we all need to be reassured that contamination tests have taken place, and the report is a little bit woolly on that. Thank you.
Over to you, Richard.
Thank you. As part of the application, contaminated land assessments were provided. These have been assessed by our environmental health colleagues, who are satisfied with the contents of those reports provided. There are also a number of conditions 13, 14, 15 and 16, as set out in the maiden agenda, all specifically deal with contamination matters and are there to ensure that the provisions of those contamination reports are complied with, whilst also ensuring that any further contamination picked up, should permission be approved, is dealt with in the appropriate way to ensure that the occupiers of these dwellings, if they're approved, are not impacted on by ground contamination. I hope that helps answer your question, Councillor.
Any other questions? No, that's fine then, Richard. Thank you. No more questions for you. No other speakers. So if anybody would like to start the debate, please. Councillor Steadman. Oh, Neil Smith, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Smith. I just, for some reason, didn't read your name. Mr. Smith's the applicant.
No press. Okay. Yeah, I was just going to give a sort of potted history of our involvement with the site. Really, the site became available because of the retirement of the site owner operator who'd been involved with it. Been working now with it for 30 years or so. His son wasn't interested in taking the business on, so they asked agents to market the property as a going concern initially. 3 parties visited the site but weren't forthcoming with offers as an ongoing business. The agent was then approached 7 or 8 individuals who were looking for commercial properties in the Vale, and again no interest was actually formalised with that. The property then was marketed as a residential opportunity without consent, and which I visited and then made an offer on afterwards. And they did advise that it's, as part of that sale, that when the property burnt down, I think 10 years ago, the planners preferred it to be a residential site, or that was the preference, rather than it being a garage site again. A pre-app was submitted, which received a relatively positive response to a 3-plot scheme. We then put an application in for the 3-plot scheme, which was soundly objected to by the local residents, which we took on board, and working with Richard, we revised the scheme to 2-story, 2-plot scheme really, which I think is more appropriate for the site than the original scheme, so we acknowledge that. We then also went to the parish council, which, as Richard said, was again quite a positive response from that. And just to confirm that the properties are of a high architectural standard, they're sustainable, they're efficient, and we think they're appropriate for the location, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. If you just remain there just a few seconds. Has anybody got any questions for Mr. Smith? No? Right. Thank you very much then, Mr. Smith. Councillor Steadman, you did indicate that you wish to speak.
Have we started the debate now?
I'm sorry. Councillor Evans is not speaking tonight, Sarah. There's been a change of plan. Sorry that you went in for. Can we now start the debate? And as I said, Councillor Steadman had indicated speak.
I think it was me jumping the gun, Chair. Yeah, I saw I am, together with Councillor Evans, the ward councillor here. I would like to thank Mr. Smith actually for taking on board all of the parish council's comments. I think what we see before us here is about the best you could get from this site. I like the layout and the design, but I'm happy to wait for further debate if anybody else wants to pass comment.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think certainly 2 houses is a lot better than 3. And of course, as it's been a garage, there's all, I know not for some time, but there have been comings and goings, etc. But along that area of road, that I've seen cars coming down back quite fast. And I would like, if this is passed, to make sure that the garage to each property remains a garage. And so there's a 106 agreement to actually make sure that that does stay a garage and that it is not turned into a room, because houses that don't have that facility, sometimes there's a lot of traffic sitting on the road. And so I think that I would like, if it is passed, I would hope that the ward councillor would be happy for that to happen.
Anybody else wish to comment on this application? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with this particular application. It complies, as far as I see, with all of the local plan policies and MPPF, etc. And the developers obviously quite clearly listened to the parish council and to the ward councillors, and I think that has to be given some credence as well, and made those changes. So yeah, I don't see any reason why we should be refusing this. I think it's probably a recommendation to approve.
Are you proposing? Okay. Councillor Steadman.
Musical chairs, this isn't it, Chair? Yes, I think what Councillor Holmes was referring to was to remove the permitted development rights. Would that be correct, Jim? Mr. Worley, sorry.
It's all right. No, it's not technically. So it's just a prohibition, just a limitation on the use.
Who's switching me off? Can I propose permit with that limited to garage use on it then, please? Thank you.
Okay, it's been proposed. Councillor Wood.
I'm happy to second that.
Right, it's been proposed and seconded. There any more debate? No? Can I have a show of hands who vote for permit? That's unanimous, so that application is permitted. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time, Mr. Smith. Yeah. I think Councillor Brown's I don't know if Councillor Brown's gone out to sort it. Thank you. Yeah, for those that are listening online, we've actually, if we had a lot of people come in, we'd actually put people in the foyer so they could watch the debate there because of COVID regulations. Yeah, okay, fine, thank you. Our next application, which should have been Burton Lazars 21008344, has been withdrawn from tonight's meeting. People were informed that it had been withdrawn. So we now move on to our next application, which is application number 210100604, Toffs Hill, Stavern. And I believe that is Gareth.
Chair, can you hear me okay?
Zooming in to join us. And yes, here is Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Great stuff. Okay. If we could go to the slideshow then. If we could go to the first slide, please. Thanks. Thank you. So this application site is located on the eastern edge of Stavern Village and on the north side of Toffs Hill. It currently comprises a large barn which has been used for agricultural and equestrian purposes. To the northwest of the site is a paddock, and to the rear and to the eastern side is open countryside. The site is considered to be detached from the established built-up area of the village and has a distinctly rural character. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the demolition of the existing barn and the erection of a single 4-bedroom dwelling contained within the footprint of the existing barn. Access would come from Toss Hill with parking at the front of the site. So if we could just go to the next slide. We can see that the red outline on the slide shows the footprint of the existing barn, and then the grey area is the footprint of the proposed new dwelling. There has been some recent planning issue on the site. Last year, the planning application for a single dwelling was refused and then dismissed on appeal. That proposed dwelling had a much more contemporary design. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see that this design of the proposed dwelling within this scheme is of a utilitarian design, much more simple, with metal cladding on the elevations to give the appearance of a barn-like structure. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see that the proposed dwelling would be all over one level, large footprint, and contain 4 dwellings, four bedrooms, I should say. In terms of consultation responses, there's been no objections from the technical consultees, and the proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of highway safety, archaeology, impact on local wildlife, and residential amenity. There has, however, been a substantial objection made from the Parish Council, and the full details of the points that the Parish Council have made are on page 63 to 64 of the agenda. The concerns raised by officers on this application are based on the impact on the character of the site and the wider landscape. This is due to the proposal introducing a large dwelling within a site which is detached from the village, and detached from the large built-up part of the village, and with a sensitive and elevated position within the landscape. Furthermore, while not made, the neighbourhood plan is at an advanced stage and contains a clear limit to development and a clear direction in travel as to where the village assessment should be. This site would fall outside of that. And it's for that reason that this application comes forward with an officer recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Gareth? No, doesn't appear to be any questions, Gareth. So thank you for your presentation. We have two speakers tonight. The first one is Ken Bray, who is a parish councillor and is against the proposal. Mr. Bray, if you'd like to join us on the table, please. And I don't have to tell you, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ken Bray, Chair of the Parish Council, Southern Parish Council. I've been asked to speak tonight to represent the Parish Council and the community of Stathern. This proposal is most unwelcome and is not supported by any planning policies. It's been a long-held view that Toss Hill is special and should be preserved, and with no residential development to blight it. This has been reflected and highlighted in every assessment, whether for the Melton Plan itself, the Stathern Conservation Area assessment, the Stathern Neighbourhood Plan, 2 planning committee assessments and 2 appeal inspectors' decisions. Each application has failed on basic and fundamental policies. Both inspectors at appeal stated that the main issue is the effect of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area and the setting of the Stathern Conservation Area, and conclude that this harm is not outweighed by any public benefit. The Melton Local Plan strategic vision is to respect the individual character and distinctiveness of Melton's villages, preserving their heritage. Safeguarding valued heritage and local landscapes is listed as a strategic issue. The relevant policies are listed in the officer's report, and Councillor Steadman will reiterate them. They also appear in our written objections. I won't repeat all that again. It's one of the less endearing quirks of the planning system that despite all that history and guidance, an applicant can bring forward a thinly disguised repetition of their earlier proposal. I'd like to emphasise the impact and harm this would have. It's a massively important and prominent site. The applicant describes it as adjacent to the built form, which it isn't. Adjacent means sharing a boundary. The officer's report states it to be on the edge of the village, and on a 2-dimensional map it may look as if it is, but in the real 3-dimensional world, it's higher than any other building in the village and in a very prominent and dominant position, visible for miles to the northwest across the vale, a bit like a beaver castle in miniature. It looks down on all of the village dwellings in all directions. You'll have seen this when you visited, some of you for the third time. Again, the inspector noted this aspect. Any dwelling here, and this one is massive despite the claims, would intrude into the landscape both day and night. I've said before that the current barns, ugly to some and a good example of the local vernacular to others, are not visible for at least half the time when it's dark. The frequent access of a dwelling site compared to the agricultural access is also problematic given the nature of the use of the track by pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders. Highways have failed to take this into account and the cumulative effect of this dwelling on the narrow approaches, again affecting the unique nature of the area. We urge you to refuse this application in the strongest possible terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bray. If you can just stay where you are a minute. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask Councillor Bray? No? Well, thank you very much, Councillor Bray. Our second speaker on this application is the Ward Councillor, Councillor Steadman.
Councillors, Chair. This same site was refused by this committee in 2016 at a time when there was no 5-year land supply and no development plan. The planning inspector upheld that decision by quoting policy BE1, which is extending into open countryside, and OS2, which is development outside the settlement envelope, and detracting from the clearly defined spatial identity of the village. The inspector also recognised the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside in this area. We also refused the site next door, which is closer to the village, and again, the inspector upheld our decision. We refused this site again in December 2020. Again, it went to inspection, and again, the inspector upheld our decision. And I quote, "To conclude, the proposal would harm the character and appearance of the area and setting of the conservation area. This would be contrary to policies EN1, EN6, EN13, SS1 and SS2 of the local plan. Amongst other things, these seek to ensure new development does not have an unacceptable adverse effect on an area's sense of place and local distinctiveness. I have found that the proposal would harm the character and appearance of the local area. The adverse impact of the proposal would not outweigh the identified benefits." He goes on to state that the landscape visual appraisal considers the site and its immediate vicinity of a high landscape value and highlights the harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, namely the conservation area. Both times this committee has refused this development, recognising the intrinsic value of this unique environment, and both times the planning inspector has upheld our decision. I therefore ask you to refuse this application in line with officer's recommendation on policies EN1, EN6, EN13, SS1 and SS2. And I would also like to quote the neighbourhood plan policies for Stathen, although carrying medium weight at the moment, they might not by the time this gets to inspection. Policy H2, which restricts development to that which adjoins the limits to development. Policy H2, which meets the identified housing need, and policy ENV9, important views. And this barn, I believe, is captured by views number 2 and number 10. Toffs Hill also has its own policy, CFA4, which highlights comments in our own local plan, which says it would be inappropriate in landscape and development pattern terms to continue this pattern of development up the slope. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steadman. Has anyone got any questions for Councillor Steadman? No? Fine. Then we would start the debate. So over to you, members. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report and the history pretty much says it all on this one, and what comes before us now I don't see as any significant improvement from what's come before, and it's the principles of development and in particular terms to that area that that both ourselves and an inspector have shared that view that they should be protected. So I won't move it because it's not right for the first speaker to do so, but I happily listen to anybody that maybe comes up with any views that make me change my mind, but I'm in favour of us refusing in line with officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Anyone, Councillor Chandler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, the applicants come forward with a massive house. It might be 4 bedrooms, but it's certainly covering a lot of area. And we've all commented on that at the 2 previous applications. And I think it's a bit of a slight on the farming industry to say it's a barn, because I've never seen a barn like that before. And I'm quite familiar with livestock barns and storage barns. I mean, they're just trying to get it under false pretenses, in my opinion, and it's a massive place, and it's totally out of character with the situation it's placed in. And I'm quite prepared to propose that it is refused as per the application.
So you're proposing it, Councillor Chandler?
Yes.
Fine. Councillor Holmes had indicated she wished to speak. Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, I would quite happy to second the application. Could I just ask our planning officer, our chief planning officer, when we have this policy to put an extraordinary house somewhere, I don't think this is extraordinary. I think it looks like a prison or something, but then it might have been a different matter, might it not? But, you know, I know I get all the policies in which I totally agree, but.
Yeah, there is that provision in the MPPF. We encountered it, didn't we, in Redmile a couple of months ago, 3 months ago. This isn't in that league, and the applicant isn't promoting it in that way, to be fair to them. I mean, I don't think there's an element of that debate in for this item tonight.
I'm happy to second anyway. Thank you.
So it's been proposed and seconded. Is there any more questions or debate that wants to take place? No? So can I please go to the vote then? So it's been proposed for refusal. Can I have a show of hands who accept that proposal? That is a unanimous decision, so the application is refused. Thank you very much, Councillor Bray. Our next application is Longcliffe Hill, Old Dalby, application number 21011092, Fields OS 2713 and 2100. Over to Mr. Worley, who will speak on this matter.
If you can get the images back, please. Well, I say images, there only is one. And all I'm going to do, members, is orientate you. And the reason I'm doing that is I understood there may have been some difficulties accessing the site because it's a building site. That's the one, thank you. So you can see on that plan, there's a grey line traverses left to right. That's the line of a footpath, and just beneath that is the line of a hedge. You can make that out in green. And the ditch we're talking about ran and still runs for part of that, and just running through the gap between those 2 features, basically. So if you did go on site, you'll have hopefully noticed that that part further to the right, east, sorry, is still intact, but that part to the west has been infilled, and I think I'd call it a depression has been introduced to replace it, but it's not a functioning ditch like the other one once was. So the report explains its background, including my comment there once was, because it ceased to be before it was removed. Just wanted you all to be sure what we're dealing with tonight. It's a very discreet application. I think the approval that we gave had more conditions that you can shake a stick at, but this application is homing in on just one of them, and it was specifically about removing the hedge, nothing else, nothing about houses and hedges and roads and heights or anything, just the ditch.
Any questions for Mr. Worley? No, no questions. So I'll now call on a parish councillor for Old Dalby, who is speaking against the application. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I've not got your name.
Sorry, we only had our meeting earlier this week and we decided who was going to come. I'm Councillor George Schmidt, Chairman of the Parish Council at the moment.
3 minutes, as you know, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you. I thought the best way was to discuss how we got here. This development is the amalgamation of 3 individual sites, each independently granted outline permission before either our neighbourhood plan or the Melton local plan were approved. The ditch under consideration and the whole hedge area was a pre-existing field boundary between 2 of those 3 sites. Our neighbourhood plan was adopted in 2018, soon after the 3rd site was granted outline permission. Application 181111 full, submitted after our neighbourhood plan came in force, sought to combine the 3 sites into a single full plan, which was granted in 2020. Next came the application 20593 BAC, which was approved with the condition 22, which the developer now seeks to have removed. Throughout both of these latter 2 applications, the Parish Council consistently called for protection of the hedge and ditch, citing our neighbourhood plan policies ENV3 and ENV4, covering wildlife corridors, habitat, connectivity, and existing trees and hedges. This hedge and ditch connects a wildlife corridor highlighted in our neighbourhood plan to a ditch directly opposite the development site, which then continues between Croft Gardens and Hawthorne Close into the centre of Old Dalby, providing a continuous habitat connectivity route into the heart of the village. Without wishing to second guess the full thinking of the planning officers and the committee at the time, they considered to impose the condition 22. We believe it was imposed to reinforce the protection of the ditch, even though LCC Ecology did not specifically ask for it at the time. The applicant does not provide material information why the condition should be removed, particularly in relation to our relevant neighbourhood plan policies, which we raised at the time. I'd also like to point out to the committee that these 2 policies, ENV3 and ENV4, have not been mentioned or discussed in your officer's report. So with respect, I do not believe you've been given all the pertinent information to make your decision. Our environment policies were prepared with due diligence, consulting widely, agreed with on external examination by an appointed government examiner, and carry full planning weight. Our policies add additional local detail to borough and national policies and are equally important. Therefore, urge you to refuse the application and agree that condition 22 imposed previously should remain so as to preserve this ecological benefit to our community.
Thank you. If you'd just like to remain there. Are there any questions to ask? Anybody wish to? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's probably, as you say, before your time maybe, but I think we want to apologise to you, because we really felt and we did listen to everybody who made suggestions and how it was, and we want to apologise. Well, I do anyway, because we and I also want to apologise for some of those, the look of those houses that are not rural, they look urban. Thank you.
I don't think there was really a question there, Councillor Holmes, but still. Are there any questions, anybody? No. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to call upon James Bottrell, who's the agent for this application. Good evening, Mr. Botterill. You have 3 minutes to speak, and our solicitor will tell you when that 3 minutes is nearing its end. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all fully aware that this development has been extremely emotive for local residents over the past few years, and as a result, emotive for the local parish council and local councillors. This evening, I urge the planning committee to put these emotive feelings to one side and to determine this application based on the facts. It's important that the planning committee deals with this application based on how a planning inspectorate would deal with it without any historic prejudices. Reinstating a ditch will offer no drainage benefits to this site, as the ditch will not be connected to any watercourse. The approved drainage scheme for this site, which was approved by this planning committee and supported by the LFFA, does not require the ditch, and it has been designed without one. Any ditch will be a dry depression in the ground. A dry ditch running alongside an existing hedgerow offers no biodiversity or ecological benefit. I've recently spoken to Sue Timms, Leicestershire County Council's ecologist, and she told me that she has always understood that the original ditch would be infilled and that reinstating it for ecology reasons is pointless. I've also spoken to 2 further independent ecologists, and neither of them were able to provide me with any reason why reinstating a ditch, which is not connected to a watercourse, will have any ecological benefit for the site. In fact, given that the hedge was recently reinstated only last year, that actually reinstating the ditch could cause further harm to the ecology, which has already been established. Jim has prepared a comprehensive committee report that outlines the simple facts of this application and draws the only reasonable conclusion. However, should this committee decide to refuse this application against Jim's recommendation, though you'll need to articulate a robust ecological argument, otherwise your grounds for refusal will have little weight or purpose. And to finish, I'd just like to say that the hedgerow was the most important feature to be reinstated to give the wildlife corridor. I think the ditch has just become a bit of a red herring. The ditch itself will offer no further benefit than the hedgerow that's already been reinstated. Thank you.
If you can just remain there, Mr. Botterill. Has anyone got any questions for Mr. Botterill? Councillor.
Yes, it has been emotive, you're quite right. Could you tell me concisely, you've applied for that condition to be removed. What is the benefit of it being removed?
Because the condition serves no purpose.
Well, no, the condition, forgive me for contradicting you, but we impose that condition without any reference to ecology or drainage. We're not asking for that ditch to be reinstated. We're asking for it to be retained. None of it should ever have been filled in the first place. What's the benefit of you filling it in? Who benefits? What does it achieve?
I don't see the answer to the question.
Okay, I'll ask it again then simply. You've applied for the ditch to be filled in. Why?
I'm sorry, but we didn't apply to be filled in.
Well, you've applied for the permission to be retained, to be removed.
We don't see the need to reinstate a ditch that serves no purpose.
You're not answering my question.
Could I ask you what the benefit would be for us to reinstate it? Because that's what this committee's got to determine this
If I
evening.
may, Chair, it shouldn't need reinstating because we put a condition on it that it should be retained. So it should still be there.
Just to confirm, we're not dealing with any sort of retrospective matters now. It is only what's before you to that removal of that condition, I'm afraid. So that's all we can deal with in terms of this committee tonight.
Councillor Chandler.
Mr. Botterill, did you say the ditch was dry? Because when I went, it was, and I'm going back to the first application, there was plenty of water in it, and it was a drainage ditch. Farmers value ditches. You have to remember that Longcliffe Hill comes down from quite a height to where that development is. I mean, as a farmer, we value our ditches. That's how we get rid of water. And you spend January and February digging them out. So I can't quite understand how you've got a dry ditch all of a sudden. Perhaps you could explain it to me.
I think this is where the confusion came at the last committee and why this condition was actually put on this approval. Yes, historically, there was a running ditch. And however, there's since been an approval for 36 houses and an approved drainage scheme, which no longer requires the ditch. That's why the ditch is dry, because the new drainage is in place. And the ditch in the ditch doesn't connect to anything. So that ditch was fed by Longcliffe Hill. That drain has been now diverted into the new SUD system, hence why it's dry.
If I may come back, Madam Chairman, so that you're actually saying that the water that comes down Longcliffe Hill no longer gets as far as that ditch?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Any more questions for Mr. Bottrell? No? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bottrell. We now go over to debate. So who wants to start the debate? Nobody? Oh, sorry. I didn't see you down there, Mr. Pritchett, Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My experience is that dry ditches are beneficial to wildlife and can be very important. And there are a number of studies showing that various insects and animals benefit from them. And I think that was one of the points being made by the Parish Council of these wildlife corridors as a separate issue to a drainage issue. And when ecology people do their reports, they sometimes do them with a narrow scope rather than the broader benefit. And I personally, I take issue with, in other words, the fact that LCC ecology don't value the ditch doesn't mean to say it isn't valuable, and it isn't valuable within the parish and value. So that's what I've got to say on that one.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Similarly, and that's why I asked the question, what's the benefit? Because, okay, LCC have said there's no significant ecological value. We didn't ask for it to be retained for that. We simply asked for it to be retained. There's bound to be some. So what I was looking for was, where's the gain in changing the status quo? Why should we relent on a condition when there's no benefit to anybody? In fact, it's not part of the drainage of the site anymore. Okay, fine. But I think the application and the wordings, sort of says that the loss of the ditch on ecology, the LCC don't object, and the loss of the ditch on ecology grounds, and as such, there are no grounds to insist on the provision of the ditch. It's the retention of the ditch that was there. The fact that it may have dried up doesn't stop it perhaps becoming wet again. And if nobody's going to benefit from it, if the plot owners aren't going to benefit from it, if we aren't going to benefit from it, if the village isn't going to benefit from it being filled in, and the developers got no benefit, no perceived or told benefit, why are we changing the status quo?
Thank you. Councillor Steadman.
Wow, how to follow that, Chair. I just feel that yet again, we have put a condition on a site to make it attractive, and here we're sat trying to take it off that site. The Parish Council states that in their neighbourhood policies, ENV 3 and 4, that it is treasured for whatever reason. And that's the Localism Act. That has given them the ability to shape their environment. Our own policy ENV states that new development proposals will be supported where they retain and enhance important green infrastructure elements such as water courses, including ditches and their riparian zones with buffers. Also woodlands, orchards, mature trees and hedgerows. And I think where we're going here is to refuse on neighbourhood plan policy ENV 3 and 4 and our own policy EN3. I quite agree that if it has no value to the developers, why are we filling it in? Thank you.
Any other questions, anyone? Councillor Wood.
I just think in terms as well, in terms of sense of place and in terms of landscape heritage, hedgerows tend to be associated with ditches, not by themselves. And I think just retaining it becomes actually something around heritage and sense of place as well.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this application? No. Is anybody going to make a proposal? Councillor Stead.
Sorry, Chair, I perhaps didn't make that clear. I thought I just had. Thank you. Didn't, sorry. Okay, Chair, I've put it all away now. I propose to refuse this application on local plan policy EN3 and I believe neighbourhood plan policy EN3 and 4. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Councillor Pritchett was first. Are you going to second that
I will second that, Chair.
proposal? Thank you. Councillor Illingworth, you wish? No, thank you. Right, we've had a proposal for refusal. Can I have a show of hands who goes with that? Right, that is 10. Councillor Brown is not with us because he got an interest in this matter and he left the room. So there are no abstentions, nobody voting against. So the proposal to refuse is agreed. Thank you. There are no urgent matters, so I'd like to declare the meeting over. Thank you.